Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Crown Zenith, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the top 8 results from the Melbourne International Championships, the OCIC. It was a 528-player tournament, but it's people gathering from across the globe, usually some of the best from each region, all end up here. So we have a very star-studded top 8, in fairness, with some players that are really performing well this season, as well as some veterans in here at the same time. And ultimately, the story still was a Lugia fest. It was almost 50% of the day 2 decks here. So Lugia was exceptionally popular. And it did make up 4 of the top 8 placements. But there were actually some other decks in here. Again, decks that you'd come to expect, the Mew and the Lost Zone boxes, as well as a Regis making it into top 4. Let's start off looking at Azul's winning deck, the Lost Zone box. He's played Lost Box at basically every tournament apart from one where they played Control, and typically he's kind of been known for playing the Kyogre variant, but this time they've dropped Kyogre and they've kept basically like everything else the same about the deck, but just added in Drapion and Skyseal Stone as like a mini package in here. So a lot of the things we've seen from the list previously have like retained in the list, like the one Bird Keeper coming into the 60. Having the Greninja Water Energy combo, still very popular, can set up Sableye damage and whatnot, gives you lots of play into the mirror, and just has lots of flexible damage output in general. But decided to have Snorlax and Zeraora as one prize options alongside Choice Belt. Obviously, Belt Lax gives you a way through good old Stoutland. Dragonite with just Gate gives you an alternate path to knock out a Stoutland in one turn as well. But then you also have the Zeraora, which is a free retreat Pokemon, which is actually pretty handy, but also can be belted up to knock out lightning weak mons like Lugia and Palkia. So seems pretty valuable there for having upgrades in the deck list. And it's quite a mini Skyseal Stone package with just Drapion and Dragonite. Not playing a Raikou V is kind of interesting. Because, of course, Dragonite V only hits 250, so typically to get the full value of Skyseal Stone Dragonite, you probably need some prep damage with things like Lost Mine for like a late game play, which doesn't always line up with Lugia, but I guess sometimes can work out. There are other upsides of Dragonite, of course. It's helpful against things like Vikavolt and gives you at least a low damage output shred option, so you're not completely losing the game instantly to annoying walling mons. But yeah, not a like fully supported Skyseal Stone. We'll see Pedro's listed momentarily that has a bit more support towards the Seal Stone, because you kind of just have to randomly draw this card at the right moment. But I suppose you have a lot of time, at least against Mew, to make this Drapion combo come off. So you should have a pretty easy time into the Mew just by virtue of having Drapion in the first place, but also having a Skyseal Stone giving you essentially an extra turn on top to make your combo happen. And then the Dragonite is one that's previously been in the list for a variety of reasons, and now a Skyseal Stone kind of chips in here and there. So because you're not playing the Kyogre, you get to steal a few energy spaces, which is cool. So the like V package basically would have just been more basic energy, essentially, if you were still playing the Kyogre. So other than that, it's still very similar to what we've seen Azul play in the past. Just the one recycler required when you don't play the Kyogre, because it's much less of your combo. Outside of that, more or less the same thing that we've seen this whole time. I'm actually super interested in the decision to go away from Kyogre, because it seemed like such a big play against Mew in the first place, so you didn't need Drapion previously. It could even be just the fact that we were starting to see wash-watered Manaphy's go into Lugia builds, that it was just ruining a late-game strategy from a Kyogre, so wanted to have a more proactive, I'll just hit them in the face approach with some of these inclusions instead. So that could be the new direction that Azul was thinking about. Obviously, we'll probably get to hear it from him on his podcast, the Uncommon Energy Pod, if you're not aware of it, or his channel as well, of course, Azul GG. So I'm sure we'll get more insight from Azul himself about his choices, but obviously a very prolific Lost Box player and made some pretty good choices, I'd say, yeah, to get a very solid list going ahead. We have a Lugia placing second with Reagan. Reagan, again, very strong player. Definitely on the come up with that very strong testing group that just can't stop making top 8 and higher placements, this time in the finals. And it's not too dissimilar from a list we saw the previous week. with Lugia, that 3-2 line is becoming more and more like accepted, I guess is the right way to say it, so that you have the space for the double belt and the double vacuum to keep you flexible against a number of different archetypes and to give yourself a decent amount of outs against path decks, and then still having the belts available for like mirror match situations and Mew and such. Just seems to be in that nice catch-all where it's enough power spike alongside the Lugia to attack with, or with the Raikou to attack with in mirror, that it gets its value. And it's choosing to play the Bird Keeper with some respect to paralysis and control decks, rather than playing an Irida package. If you are playing Irida, you're typically going down in counts to 1 vacuum, 1 belt, and making spaces elsewhere. But just the Bird Keeper coming in for Reagan. It was also a top 64 placement with John, who's been playing Lugia this whole time, with basically always achieving points. In top 4, we see Owen with a judge-based build of Mew that is also choosing to play Aerodactyl V-Star. So again, continuing to prove itself over and over again. I'm continually sus of the card, but Owen, even in his post, said that Aero was like very strong, very helpful. So it's one of those things where if you expected a Lugia Fiesta, which I really expected OCIC to be, because basically ICs are so busted, and we know that it was a smaller tournament, that so many people just wanted top 1 to 8 points because it's so many points, right? And it feels like the universal safe pick for good players right now is Lugia, right? So it wasn't surprising to see such a huge meta percentage of Lugia being played. So an Aerodactyl in that context makes a lot of sense. I like seeing the spaces committed to Rotom Phones just to make sure you get into that game that little bit more. The high judge count definitely making sense. I always like seeing Silene Pad as a combo in the deck as well, so yeah, pretty cool overall to see the 60. Just a couple paths in there, but certainly gets the job done. And then we have Rahul, tragic tail in top 4, where he had this really awkward DPL for taking a mulligan before laying out prize cards, which is just such a weird ruling, and I feel really bad for him because he's been so close to that breakthrough win for a long time now, and is basically due an IC win. Then again, it's Regis, so anything could have happened regardless in the series, but it felt pretty bad that he wasn't able to at least make the finals, just circumstantially. But yeah, Reggie's still doing very well. He's played Regis a lot this season, and hasn't really made too many changes to the deck list. It's just having Rope and no other tech choices in the deck whatsoever. A couple shoes and a Lotto coming in. And Sam Chen also got 9th place with a 60, so seems to be a very good Regis going forward. And the Rope gives you enough outs to some annoying stuff like Peak and Ice Cube. I think that's why you're seeing a boss as well as 2 Serena. Oftentimes you just see Serenas, but the boss's orders allow you specifically against Ice Cube to try and bring it active and whatnot with Rope combinations to try and stop block face combos. This deck still has no answer to a lone Ice, but it's down to the opponent to sort of make that board state. And again, if you're just expecting a ton of Lugia and a ton of Mew and Lost Box, the 3 best decks in the game, Regis is still going to continue to be that strong choice. We see Raz in top 8 once again. He's been also on a tear recently. We all knew he was a very, very good player, but he seems to have stepped up his game massively with just adapting Lugia as he goes. With, I believe he got a top 4 placement at the last regional, and now he's got this 5th place finish at an IC. So really mopping up a ton of points with the Irida package that was played last time in the list. So again, just very comfortable with a 60 at this point. Playing just very safe counts of everything, going for the 3-3 split that we've seen sometimes with the US contingent of Lugia players. So it definitely seems to be a decent shout. Then we see the other Lost Box, Pedro, also well accustomed to doing well at the OCIC, and is also playing a Skyseal Stone package. So this is quite different to Azul's, where choosing to add in an extra energy type in Metal Energy to accommodate a Zamazenta. So isn't playing choice belts, but is playing 1 Lax 1 Zam. Zam being a better option, I suppose, against Stoutland, because you just need less things, right? You only need to have the gate and the turn attachment to be able to retaliate on a Stoutland, so you don't require having belt. But also you have Raikou V and Drapion as your sort of answer mons, and I feel like this list allows a Skyseal Stone to be enabled that so much more often, right? Because you're playing Luminion and you're playing a Raihan to help you find that Skyseal Stone on a turn where it's super relevant. And typically, the earlier the better, right, for you to deal with a Lugia V-Star, because you really don't want to be in a situation where you have to gust it back up and deal with it. So that Raikou seems to make a decent amount of sense here in the deck list. Only one Sableye is a little bit cheeky, for sure, with only 2 Rod in the list as well. So that's one thing to note, but otherwise, looking like a very solid 60. I do really like that we've sort of gone back towards a capture energy heavy Lost Box. I always felt a little bit out of control with Rayquaza Raikou builds that were just all basic energy. It felt like you were so all in on those 4 VIP pass, and even playing Quick Balls is really awkward in that deck because you don't have much discard synergy that you really like. So Lost Box getting to play captures with the 2 lists that we've seen, even though they're not playing Kyogre, is really interesting to me, and I think is really, really solid. I'm a big fan of Zamazenta, still continue to be. Still will probably be playing Zamazenta myself in Bochum in my Lost Box. So it's cool to see that it's got the nod. I also understand the reasoning of going between the 2, because the Zamazenta obviously is a lot less proactive than Snorlax. You have to wait till your opponent started to hit you back, whereas you can steal the tempo yourself if you just want to thump through certain things. But yeah, quite low on the switch outs in this list, but that's all to incorporate some really interesting cards like Roxanne, which can be big in mirror and all sorts of situations, and the fish combo. So that's really where a lot of the space has been taken up for Pedro. Then we have a couple more Lugias to round out the top 8. These all seem to be between 1 and 2 cards at this point. We've really narrowed down Lugia substantially. This one is playing Irid, it's playing with 3/3 Lugia. Not too much else to say apart from that. And then we have Grant, who's finally started playing Lugia himself, and is playing Wash Water. That was kind of in vogue for the last regional, and for some reason was dropped by a number of players. Maybe just expecting more and more mirror matches to be the most important thing rather than Lost Box, but I still think it gives you a lot of control in the Lost Box matchup. So this is all the Mon techs with the Manaphy Wash and the Dunsparce still coming in to the 60 rather than having crazy variety of energy going on in the list, and playing the Birdkeeper over the Irida package, and just having the cheeky 1 Vacuum in the list. So yeah, looking all pretty good there. Let's have a look at the statistics to see the meta share. Like I said, 47% Lugia, absolutely absurd. I mean, it was for very good players, and they're all coming to quite a small tournament. It definitely makes sense for Lugia to have been really heavily played and just be the safe deck. I think it's just very, very obvious. Lost Zone, unsurprisingly, the second most popular, with a decent amount of pretty high placements here as well. The highest placing Rayquaza, which is the combination of Rayquaza and Raikou, by the way, for those people wondering, was Jamie Frankland. And they were actually playing a 1/1 Giratina V-Star, which I think is super interesting because Shred is a really good option against Lone Flying Peak and Lone Ice Cube. So I've definitely debated my Rayquaza to have a Giratina on its own, but also making the space for the V-Star, because the deck doesn't have a V-Star power, and you may as well have Star Requiem at your disposal. I think it makes a little bit more sense to play the V-Star if you're playing Lost Vacuum, though, because it seems like most of the big things will Parasol themselves, especially because they want to do it against Lost Box anyway, because it blocks Lost Mine. So I feel like you probably get away with just the Giratina V quite often, but I suppose also just having the Lost Impact option is pretty reasonable as well. Very high right hand count, not playing any Counter Stadium, so if you come up against any Path deck, Greninja does get shut down, and that's a little bit sketchy because it's so important to just cycle with this deck, because there's so many important cards that you just need to continually see. But yeah, really cool to see the Giratina incorporated. I remember our top 10 pre-OCIC talked about Giratina V, so it's cool to see that was picked up on to a pretty high placement, the highest placing Raikou Ray for sure. But it looks like most of the other successful builds were non-Ray builds, so it seems to be a bit of a change up of how things have gone there. Decent amount of Mew, still doing well. A few control variants. I know Sander went really out there with his latest control concoction. I think he just wants variety, essentially, with his deck list, and to try new things all the time. He's not too fussed about points. He's done so well already, so he can just be at that crazy experimental phase. Why not? So yeah, really interesting rundown for the OCIC. Let me know what you think about the most successful lists, and how things are going to be shaping up for Bochum Regionals, which is this weekend, as well as Knoxville, I believe it is. So yeah, it should be good fun. We're continuing on with good old Crown Zenith for a little while longer, so grit your teeth and get through it, get those championship points. I'm only 40 CP away from my own invite, so I'm hoping that a top 128 will get me there, so I'm just going to stick to what I know, which is Lost Box personally. And let me know what you're thinking. Are you bored of the deck you have been playing this whole season, or are you just sticking to your guns and playing the thing that you have all this time? Because, why change now? I'll hear your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in another video for tomorrow. Cheers.